Hi folks, welcome to episode 103 of the Epochs of the Lotus Eaters. Today Bo and I will be continuing discussing the history of Assyria, with Sargon II and Sennacherib we're going to cover. So this is the very height of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Tiglath-Pileser has been like, no, we need to oppress people better than this, and has created like 100,000 man professional army, which is possibly the worst news anyone in the Middle East could have received. Oh yeah, the Assyrian army's just got better, by the way. Oh, brilliant. Yeah, it's literally the last thing. And the thing, I was thinking about this in the shower this morning, right? I was thinking it is genuinely comparable to Mordor, right? But in the case of Mordor, at least there's some heroes who are going to save the day. In this, there's not. There's just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of unremitting tyranny. No one's coming to save the day. No one's going to overthrow Sauron. The Assyrian king is going to be there forever, and their army is just going to be marching around forever, extorting you and oppressing you.
Until the very last generation of the Assyrian kings, nobody stops them.
No.
There's sort of all internal problems and strife, but no one external comes and saves the day.
And it doesn't look like anyone's coming either.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't look like there's going to be a savior.
Yeah.
And so afterwards, you can see with the overthrow of the Assyrians, why, and the Babylonians, you can see why like someone like Cyrus the Great would seem like, you can see why he gets such a good write-up in the Bible. You know, oh God, he's not going to kill us all. That's brilliant. I love this guy. This guy's amazing. He doesn't hate us.
Yeah.
You know? Anyway.
Well, something to mention right there, where Cyrus the Great is mentioned in the Bible and all over the place. And we start to get into a period that is biblical.
Yes.
So Sennacherib, the one after Sargon II, is in the Old Testament, is in the Jewish Bible, the Bible. So yeah, he's mentioned a bit. So we do now get into sort of biblical times, essentially. So yeah, we left off with Tiglath-Pileser III.
Yep.
So we're going to pick up with his son Sargon II, and we are now into sort of the last 5 or 6 of the Assyrian kings. And you said it's the high watermark. Absolutely, I would say perhaps Sennacherib is. You can make the argument that the penultimate king, Sennacherib's grandson, Ashurbanipal, is the highest watermark, but nevertheless, I mean, it's like the British Empire. You can argue what was the highest watermark of it. But
the interesting thing about when we get to it is that it just doesn't look like the Assyrians are going to fall. You know, like until the very end, it must have been a real shock. It's been like, oh my God, it's over. You know, it must have been a total shock. Like, who could have imagined?
Yeah, I've seen it said that about maybe 15, 20, 30 years before it's completely sacked and destroyed, it looked as powerful as it had ever been. Yeah,
because it wasn't actually military or internal weakness that caused the Assyrians to fall. Really, it was overextension. But we'll get into it.
We'll get into that next time. But just to say, just a teaser on that is that we don't actually know exactly. The last 10 years or so, it's sort of, which is very telling in and of itself. The sources go almost completely quiet. But we'll get into that in detail next time. Okay, so Sargon II, and we're talking the sort of 720s BC here.
So Rome has just been founded.
Right, yeah. And that's even if you believe the probably semi-mythical dates of Rome's founding. So yeah. I mean, the high watermark of places like Sparta and Athens are still well in the future.
Yep, so 300 years away for them.
And Babylon, just to say a quick note here about Babylon, which is going to come up a fair bit in this episode and the next one. The idea of those big blue gates and those great blue tiles and the depictions of lions and things, that's all in the future.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, okay. That's from the sort of later Babylonian
it's Nebuchadnezzar.
Renaissance. Yeah, right. So even though in past episodes and this episode, no doubt I'll be putting up pictures of that, it's actually in the future.
Right, okay.
But okay, so Sargon II.
Yes.
I think Sargon II and his son, Sennacherib, who we're going to talk about, I would say they're probably the high watermark because they seem to be still in the old Assyrian mode of being just out and out true badasses that no one seems to be able to remotely stand against.
Yeah.
They don't get sort of their own families, apart from right at the end, aren't sort of, there's not too much division, apart from at the end, but we'll get to that. Certainly Sargon II seems to me to be sort of in the old school mode. Because Ashurbanipal, for example, is a bit different. He's a bit more of a scholar. But yeah, Sargon II, he personally gets involved in battles and things. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, actual warrior kings, like 3 generations of warrior kings. So, and they've just got the best military traditions, a set of functional institutions, and everyone else is just in trouble, basically. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah. And so Sargon II obviously takes that sort of regal name as a hark back to Sargon
legendary
the Great.
Name by his time.
Yeah, already 1,500 years or more before the original, the OG Sargon lived. So again, just to reiterate, I said it, I think, in the first one of these, that it's amazing, surprising, romantic even, that the Assyrians still look back at the age of the Sumerians and the Akkadians and Gilgamesh and Sargon. They still have that in their sort of cultural memory and revere it, obviously.
It kind of is their culture, though, right? Well, it's the same as our grandparents talking about King Arthur and Robin Hood.
A bit, but it's more than that, though. Is sort of what I'm saying, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even longer ago than that.
Yeah, it's a lot longer ago than that. But what I mean is, it's the river. It's the same river,
okay,
right?
Yeah.
They haven't stepped out of this river at all. So it's still authentic belief for them. Like, they're still within it. They still have the language, essentially. They still use the same writing system. Like, all of the things that, again, 1,500 years ago, like, people were putting together, it's just downstream. They're what's downstream of it. So there's something important to that, I think. Like, it's the way that they conceive of the world is still within that framework, right? They haven't had some sort of modernist revolution, and so they're not looking back at the ancient text being like, oh, this is weird, archaic nonsense. And it just feels to them natural. It's right. It's obviously very old, but it's still correct.
Yeah, just a quick note to say on that, actually, and sort of a general observation on history, is that throughout most of human history, revolutions like the French Revolution or a Marxist revolution didn't really happen very much at all. I mean, there are examples of it, but usually it's the case that you have a continuation of your culture and heritage. The idea that you're going to throw everything away and start from scratch.
Well, it's genuinely heretical.
There are examples in the ancient world and things in medieval times, but it's quite rare.
Well, I think a lot of the religious revolutions of the sort of, early Common Era onwards are kind of a mirror to the ideological revolutions in Europe. But this is the thing, isn't it? Like, the Assyrians and the Babylonians haven't had a great religious revolution. They haven't had a change in the way that they conceive of the universe. That's been consistent for 2,000 years. It's kind of wild.
The city of Ashur and the god of Ashur is still number one.
Yeah, Ashur's Ashur's literally in the heavens, stomping on every other god around, and he's been doing this for the last 1,000 years. And there's literally nothing to revise here.
yeah. And if it ain't broke.
Yeah, exactly. But I just find that fascinating because in almost, like, you look at, like, the Jewish history, there's been lots of religious change. There's arguably they aren't monotheists for quite a long time. And then they have to have a kind of religious revolution and revival and all this sort of thing. And so it's just interesting how the Assyrians just didn't seem to go through this. It's just not, no. Ashur's number one. Like, there's no complex metaphysics behind this.
It seems like we
don't need to cope.
They'll change the capital and move the capital and things, but Ashur itself and the ziggurat Ashur and the god Ashur there, that remains untouched. Also, I think conservatism with a small c, that is very, very strong throughout most of history. Like the Romans, for example, were extremely conservative. They certainly Republican Rome they sort of very, very rarely, if ever, sort of reformed their laws. Very, very rarely. If there was a law, that was it. That was
they were
sort of written in stone forever now.
They literally were carved in bronze.
Right.
Like in the 12 tablets.
Yeah.
So 12 tables of Rome, sorry. So it's just defined, isn't it?
The idea, like the modern idea that we'll just each generation or even between generations just sweep away all our concepts and values and start with new ones.
It's crazy.
That's not the norm in history at all.
That's the thing. The Assyrians have literally laboured under the same moral code for 2,000 years. And it won them, the largest empire in history at the time. So why would you think to change it?
The idea we have now that until a few years ago, no one really argued that men could be women or are women. Some men are women and some women are men. No one argued that until literally 3, 4, 5 years ago at most or something. Well, now everyone's supposed to think that's the new paradigm.
You have the occasional Roman emperor who was trying to make it so, but yeah, no.
Yeah, not no one ever, but the point is for the whole society, that's like the new
yeah, it's nonsense
paradigm now. And it's obviously completely radical, insanely radical. We live in different times. Yeah,
it's a totally different world. And the reason we're hammering this is because it's so different to how we live now. Like it's not it's not even that these are unquestionable beliefs. It's just that why would you question them is what I'm trying to get at, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure there are Assyrians who are like, is that real? And it's like, well, we do rule the world and Asher does rule in his temple. He would look at it and go, well, I mean, why wouldn't I think that we're the best and doing the best and the most godly people? Why would the gods have given us all of this dominion if we were not the most pious, godly people around?
It's self-evident.
Yeah, exactly.
Look at the empire.
Exactly.
Look at the riches of Nineveh and Asher.
Exactly. Look at the glory of our religious parades and traditions and processions. Oh, yeah, yet another idol of the foreign god has been laid at the feet of Asher. What more do you need? What else could I use to prove that we're the best and you're awful?
Yeah.
And that's a great question. What would he need? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to argue from that perspective. So yeah. So it fascinates me that what seems to be such a, I don't want to say backwards, but it's from a modern's perspective, this is insane superstition, but how successful it can be. And how long-lived and how genuinely expansive it is.
Yeah, it is impressive. The Assyrian Empire is among the most, in my mind, among the most impressive empires of all human history. So yeah, as evil as it was in all sorts of ways.
Well, and this is another thing I want to get into as well at some point, is that I genuinely think the reason the Babylonians and the Persians and the Macedonians are able to conquer such large empires across the Middle East is because of the groundwork that the Assyrians did for the 1,000 years before of just hammering every independent civilization under the heel. It's just, no, you don't get to fight us, and everyone who does dies. And that has to have some sort of eugenic effect, just like we've killed all of your warriors, this generation and the one before and the one before and the one before. And eventually Alexander gets there and it's like, well, they're all just submitting to me. Yeah, lucky you.
Yeah.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
So
it's like they're so good, they're a liability. They don't know any other way. If there's a revolt or something, there's no real politics involved. We're going to grind you to dust.
Yeah.
They don't really know any other way.
It's an affront to Asher. Don't know what you're talking about. Why would you even think that your god is anywhere near as good as Asher?
So the campaigns of Sargon II, like a lot of them, he does have to go round just sort of repeatedly for most of his reign, go round to the peripheries of the Assyrian Empire and stomp mud holes in people's asses in order to teach them to do as they're told. One of the first ones is up north. A lot of Sargon II's campaigns are in the northern region, which sometimes gets a little bit overlooked because, places like Egypt or the Levant or Babylon or Elam are sort of, a bit more glamorous. But in the north, there's a peoples up in modern day, very, very extreme northern Iraq and into sort of Armenia, even Georgia, Azerbaijan way, that whole part, like the Taurus Mountains, the eastern side of the Taurus Mountains. I'll put up a map. The Urartu, the Urartu people, which is actually a fairly broad term, seems to be a few different peoples and lots of towns. I mean, lots and lots of few cities and loads of towns and villages.
But they're venerable people as well. Like, they've been around for millennia.
They're not to be sniffed at in terms of military.
Yep.
They're not.
They're not incompetent.
Yeah, right. They're not incompetent. Absolutely. Yeah. So right up in the north of Iraq, on the Euphrates still, so not even really truly in the Taurus Mountains, there's Carchemish, very ancient town of Carchemish. We know Sargon II went there and made that submit. And it got so much silver there that it sort of changed the whole economy. Like they could, sometimes
like
that
Mansa
happens.
Musa.
Yeah. That happens sometimes.
Yeah,
like Mansa Musa is a great example. When the
Spain,
Spanish and the Portuguese got so much gold from the New World that it actually changes the whole economy. We're told that sort of silver became, like literally tons of silver. It became the new sort of standard for the Assyrian Empire. So again, a bit like in the Alexander story, at a certain point, suddenly money's it's not a problem anymore.
Yeah.
At a certain point, I can just throw endless money effectively, anything I want at any time.
And the Assyrians have extracted so many resources from just everyone around them. It's actually kind of crazy. And they're very proud of how many resources they extract from people at the point of a sword. They list every single one. They're very proud of it.
Well, in towards the very beginning of Sargon II's reign, up in Urartu in 719, 718, there's uprisings there. And it's funny how we've said before that why would you even really dare or dream of trying to rise up against the Assyrians and their unassailable army? But people do, loads of them do all the time still.
Yep.
They still fancy their chances quite often.
Yep.
I suspect in the mountainous regions of like the Taurus Mountains and the Zagros Mountains, they feel like, well, even the Assyrian army can only go so far. We can always retreat into our mountain vastnesses.
And we've got a massive defensive advantage here as well. We're at the top of a cliff and they're not. What are they going to do?
Right. But we're told that in 715 BC, they invade northern Assyria, come down out of the mountains. Yeah. Come down out of the mountains and probably raise or sack a few dozen sort of northern Assyrian towns, villages. Now, that is exactly the sort of thing, precisely the sort of thing a Assyrian king will not have. He cannot stand for it. He sort of cannot politically.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
The whole point of the whole foundation of an Assyrian king's power is that you don't mess with him. You don't dream of it. Yeah. And if you do though, well, I've got to respond.
Yeah.
Bit like in prison, if someone disrespects you, you've got to, you absolutely, or if you're the head of a gang or something, you've got no choice.
Yeah. There have to be heads on spikes.
You've got to start going a bit crazy. Yeah. Otherwise, everything that you've got will just
people start thinking
disappear.
that you're not going to crucify them. It's like, well, you can't have that. Everyone in the Assyrian Empire has to know that you could crucify them at any time.
Yeah.
For any reason you want.
Yeah, and even if it means you end up losing, you still have to throw the dice.
Yeah.
Like in prison, I suppose, if you have a fight, you may well lose it, but you have to have that fight.
Yeah.
You still have to have the fight.
You've literally got no choice.
Yeah. So we're told that their capital, if it's not really the right word to call it a capital, but there's the city of Tushpa up in those mountains, again, modern Armenia way. So Sargon II goes up there and has some campaigns.
Yeah.
And it's, even though the Assyrian propaganda tells us how brilliant and great it was, we think that it was actually a bit of an ordeal. There's a bit more to it than sort of first meets the eye when you read the Assyrian sort of victory inscriptions and things.
It's like the Assyrian version of the Dacian Wars, right? Where it's like, this is just tough. Our propaganda is going to make it look like it was easy, but come on, this took us years and it was hard. These guys were not, to be messed with.
Do just think now you've said that, and the thing that's popped into my mind is obviously how difficult mountain fighting is. It puts one of Alexander's great achievements into a higher relief when he crossed the Hindu Kush. He crossed sort of the Himalayas and came back again across them.
Hannibal crossing the Alps, fighting the tribes up there. It can't be easy.
Still, I mean, even the Alps are sort of...
Nothing compared to some mountains, yeah.
Yeah, the Hindu Kush is
something else.
Something else, exactly, yeah. So anyway, we're told that the Urartu people are great horsemen, again, like steppe peoples.
Yeah.
They've got the best horses as well, quite often we're told, and they're great on them. And they've built lots of watchtowers. They've got some, we're told they've got some sort of great system for, like I think you see in some of the Lord of the Rings films where you light pyres on top of mountains in a line to send a message very quickly.
Yeah.
They've got that going on.
Very smart.
Yeah. So they're great at mountain fighting. Sounds obvious to say, but they're mountain people. But they've sort of mastered a few of the techniques.
One thing to note with the Urartu is that they've got a really unfavorable geographic location, because whenever there's going to be an invasion from Central Asia, they're pretty much the first people that have to deal with it. So if they've maintained a cohesive kingdom for a long time, which they have, they've got to have some expertise here, because the type of people that come off the steppes to the north are just awful. Like, genuinely awful. Like, the Assyrians are awful, but at least you can reason with them. Like, okay, so if we submit and give you X number of tons of silver, you'll carry on going, great. But the people that the Urartu have had to deal with don't think that way. No, we want to eat you. We're literally going to eat you. We're literally going to rape your corpse and eat you. Because that's literally what we do. I mean, every time a steppe people comes into the light of history, they're always just the worst things that have ever existed. Like, they're just monstrous, genuinely monstrous. So yeah, at least the Assyrians have like some civilization behind their monstrosity.
There's a few places in the world, aren't there? And places like, well, what we're talking about here, the Urartu, but it's modern day, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and then into Turkey. And even places like modern day Ukraine and Belarus, and even Bulgaria, Hungary, places like that, they sort of endlessly have to deal with it.
Yeah.
They're sort of the first to have to deal with it. Places like France and Britain and Spain,
we don't even know.
Yeah, sort of saved the hassle of it all. But there you go. So Sargon II just won't stand for these Urartu incursions. Can't really. And they're quite serious. It seems they're quite serious.
Oh, yeah.
So in 714, he leads his army, gets his army together, and leads them on a circuitous route around some of the mountains, we're told. Sort of he heads east to begin with, then north, and then up into the mountains to try and surprise them. Doesn't go through the usual passes. Again, in nearly all mountain ranges, there'll be a handful of passages, handful of roads.
It's totally predictable normally, because it's giant sheer faces of rock. You have this option or that option.
Yeah.
And neither one's good, because you can barricade them with like a dozen men.
And the Urartu know, obviously, it's their home turf. They know exactly what they're doing. So he tries to sort of outfox them, outwit them, outgeneral them by going the long way round. It's funny, even today in places like Italy and Portugal, big modern places, whole countries, there's a handful of roads.
Well, the crossing between Italy and France through the Alps there's one major crossing. And it's been like that since Julius Caesar, Yeah.
So Sargon II goes along around and apparently does catch them by surprise to some degree. But apparently the going was so hard that his men are close to mutinous or something. That they're, we don't know, we don't have all the details, there's not there's not accounts, there's no diaries survive.
There's no Thucydides of Assyria, I'm afraid.
There's no proper history. Again, I can't help but mention the same things quite often, don't I? But the Peninsular War, there's lots and lots of normal people's letters, lots and lots of diarists on both sides, or Spanish, French and English and Portuguese. So we get multiple angles of the same thing quite often. And there's like official accounts, and then there's the normal people's account. And this is just in fantastic detail, really. And of course, it's obvious to say we've got none of that here. But it looks like they were mutinous on some level.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I mentioned in the last one, out of all the especially late Neo-Assyrians, Sargon II, we've actually got the most on, more than a couple of the later ones, which is interesting. Sometimes how ancient history goes. You know, like how we know lots more about the age of Caesar and Augustus than some later emperors.
Yeah.
It is sometimes. Just depends what survives. But there is a great inscription from the reign of Sargon II about going through mountains. And it's in that classic mould of...
Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, please do. Yeah.
I would look for this. So Sargon II writes, Mount Samaria is a great mountain peak that points upwards like the blade of a spear. Its summit touches the sky above, and its roots are made to reach down below to the netherworld. I mean, that is just a great opening phrase. It is not fit for the ascent of chariotry or for allowing horses, and its access is very difficult for even the passage of foot soldiers. I had my vanguard carry strong copper axes, and I cut through the high mountain crags as if they were limestone, and thereby improved the path. I took the lead of my army and made the chariotry, cavalry, and battle troops fly over the mountain as if they were brave eagles. I had the common soldiers and light infantry follow behind them. The camels and donkeys bearing the baggage leapt up its peaks like ibexes native to the mountains. I had the numerous troops of the god Asher ascend its difficult slopes in good order, and then I set up camp at the top of that mountain. Sounds like a big operation. But like you can see, every bit as professional as the Roman army here. It sounds very like nothing different about that. The Assyrians have got it all figured out.
Like we said, so Sargon II is the inheritor of Tiglath-Pileser III's professional outfit. So he's got engineers. He's basically got an engineering corps or something. And a logistics, a whole, they're not, it's very professional.
They've got an engineering corps, a logistics corps, and as you can see, it's paying off. I mean, he has to cut his way through the mountain. And if he didn't have these things, it's entirely likely he couldn't have had this campaign.
Yeah. And it's also that thing of survives much, much later into the ancient world of I've sort of conquered the mountains. I've conquered the sea. The Romans thought like that. You can conquer the sea.
Yeah.
You can conquer mountains just like a city. Yeah. And here you say it's like that, isn't it?
I love the way he describes the numerous troops of the god Asher. Like that's a really interesting way of viewing themselves. Well, we're the soldiers of Asher. It's like that's like we've said previously. Everything in the ancient world was also religious. They don't define themselves outside of religion. They can't. And so, how are you? Who are you? Well, we're the troops of the god Asher. So every war we engage in is a religious war. Like you've got to understand.
Yeah. And quite often there's something else Napoleon said is sort of every time I fight or every time I take the field, it's all in. I'm pushing all my chips in. I've either got to win, or I will win, or it's nothing. Or I may as well give in. The Assyrians aren't exactly like that, but there's an element of that to it. Like you put everything on the table. You put the reputation of the god Asher on the table every time.
Yeah, they don't do things by half measures, do they?
All right. Yeah. We can't really be seen to lose.
Yeah. The god Asher wins everything all the time, everywhere.
Yeah.
That's the standard we've set for ourselves.
Because the Egyptians were also like that. They never lost, apparently.
Wow.
They were just, if they do lose or something, it's just never mentioned. We just don't ever talk of it.
Yeah.
But
the Assyrians actually don't seem to lose until the very end.
Rarely. Well, Sargon II sort of nearly does here. So he gets a pitched battle. He does get one. And it looks like his troops would not attack. They sort of refuse to, or they're not in good enough shape to.
Really?
Yeah, maybe there's some sort of loss of morale or esprit de corps or something. So we're told Sargon himself and his sort of his hand-picked guard just charge forward on their own. And maybe that shames, that's a thing in wars quite often. You shame your own men into following you.
Yep.
And they do. And anyway, they win the day. Long story short on that one. They do win the day against the Urartu host. And so that's quite a big one because that could have gone wrong. Very nearly went wrong, it seems. But he does, Sargon II does bring the Urartu back sort of under his yoke.
And this is fairly unusual as well, because I can't think of any other examples of the Assyrian army being mutinous.
Well, we don't hear of it.
Well, yeah, we don't hear of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
You know, so just unusual, isn't it?
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.